If you're a self-employed estate agent, this episode is a must listen. Holly Boylan, Operations Director of The Avenue, shares what agents really need to succeed, from systems and structures to mindset and marketing that actually works. Hope you enjoy the episode. Holly, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So talk us through, so those who don't know you, give us the background. How did you first get into estate agency and how did you end up with the guys over at The Avenue? What's happened there?
I mean, I think a lot of people say this is that estate agency kind of fell into my lap. I just left a job that I was quite mentally unhappy in. And it was kind of one of the first jobs popped up was Purple Bricks head office. And I was like, I've got some lot of transferable skills there. I was like, I really needed this job. And what that actually turned out to be gave me like a long-term career that I really enjoy. I was in my late teens then and I just had no clue where I wanted to go with it. So Purple Bricks head office was actually how I got into the industry, which in turn, I then met James and Jack over there. I think a lot of people in the space that we're currently in the industry did like do some time at Purple Bricks is probably the best way to put it. That was kind of like a thought leader at the time. So I was really lucky that I by chance got introduced to those both and they were like, come out into the field, try this. And I just never looked back since, essentially. It feels like yesterday, but about the 7 years ago that it was at the same time.
Well, I had a chat a while ago with Tom Greenacre from Purple Bricks, and I had literally the exact same conversation with him. I was saying there must have been something in the water at Purple Bricks, because if you look at the really great self-employed estate agents out there today, a lot of them had some sort of history with Purple Bricks.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had no prior knowledge of estate agency before that. So to see that model first and then actually be educated about the branch environment and more the corporate side of things, I was just a bit like, well, why wouldn't everyone do it this way? And I think there was such a good time in that business when, people like Tom Greenacre, James and Jack were there, that it was just such a culture hotspot. You really felt like a family. And I think that attracted a lot of people to kind of getting into the self-employed area. And I don't think self-employed estate agency would be what it was today without that model kind of really leading the charge.
I suppose a bit like how during the pandemic, sort of video calls took a jump forward by 5 years, 10 years, sort of thing. The whole working from home sort of thing jumped forward. I think kind of Purple Bricks sort of dragged that more to sort of the foreground than it had done historically.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd worked, in similar environments, like to a state agency, and I always kind of felt very frustrated with the growth options and really the mentorship in those spaces that I was in. And I'm the type of person that I can easily be passionate about things that I've never really known much about before. Like I kind of get a knack for the skill with people and then connect it to the industry that I'm in. And, I'd faced different scenarios prior where it was you can't be a manager because you're too young or you can't progress there because you haven't got your A levels. And I was like, but I'm very good at this job. So I don't really see why the growth options were not available. And kind of meeting James and Jack kind of painted that picture of this is a career in an industry where it just matters of how good I am and how well I show up each day. And that was something that I've always valued about a state agency is that opportunity it gives people.
Yeah, it's kind of the great leveler, isn't it? Because if you're, 17, 18 years old and you can do a great job and sell a property, then high five. Whether you're 17 or 70, as long as you can do the job and do it correctly, then why does age matter?
Yeah, 100%. And that's always something that really frustrated me, like I said, in other working environments and state agency was just how well can I connect with the person in front of me and how much of a difference can I make to their moving journey? And obviously, since we opened the Avenue about 4.5 years ago now, I've transitioned through the self-employed agent to now I'm the operations manager. But that still remains the same. I'm still connecting with people and how to make positive impact on their day and their business. So that's really something that I've always held on to.
So elaborate slightly. So talk me through what does the day in the life of the operations director look like at the Avenue? What are sort of the core tasks and core focuses that you have day in day out? I'm sure that it's every day is very different, but what is kind of the big things that you kind of focus on every day?
So I'm heavily involved in obviously the processes that happen in the business of how the agents get to a certain outcome. Heavily involved in the onboarding of new agents, kind of bringing them into that world and kind of building those foundations with them. And I spend a lot of time coaching some of the agents at their first part of their journey when they join us, because I think that level of support is really key to when you first become self-employed, because the transition from a good estate agent to good estate agent is very much the same thing, but transition to a business owner is a whole different thing that I don't think many people talk about in the industry. It's kind of, if you're a good estate agent, anyone can be self-employed. I don't necessarily believe that. But just kind of to sum it up, every day is different, but I turn the chaos into order essentially and try and get ahead of that.
Just turn the chaos into order, just, yeah, just as you do. Go roll.
Yeah, and I've always kind of thrived with that. I kind of like that element of fixing things and putting things back together and kind of giving people clarity. And that's kind of always how I operate in my role at the Avenue, is how can I make things really clear for our agents to pick up and do, but also how can I remove as many barriers as possible.
So I'm just going to scratch away at something you said there because I completely agree with it, and I think it's probably a really great thing to look into. So lots of people go, "Oh, I'm a great estate agent, therefore I'll be a great self-employed estate agent." But I would disagree with that. I would say that probably being an estate agent is probably like 20% of the deal. Probably 80% of it is having a great estate agency business around you to support you, to show off how good you are. Because if you're the most amazing agent in the world, but no one ever calls you out, kind of what's the point?
Yeah, 100%. And I think I really believe that because I felt that at times in my self-employed career, that I'm a really good estate agent and there's nothing I won't do for my clients to get the outcome. Like, I used to refer to myself as a Jack Russell because once I'd have it like an itch to get an outcome, that would be it. I'd be fixated on it. But then when it comes to operating the business, that was where I always struggle. And I'd need that mentorship and kind of, what am I doing here? What's this jargon? What's to be expected? How do I actually find a good accountant? How do I stay compliant? How do I outsource things? I was completely left field with those things. So, and I think that's something that doesn't get a lot of airtime in our space, is how to become that business owner. And I think that the estate agency skills, you need them, but I think what's really you can't work on while being a self-employed agent is the entrepreneurship side. So I think you kind of always need to have that, but can learn the estate agency skills.
I don't know when you've read the book, The E Myth at all, but it's one of my favorites. I wouldn't say I read it, I listen to it because I'm lazy like that every now and again. And basically, that's the gist of the entire book. It's like, the myth of being a entrepreneur, which is the E part, is that you need to be really good at the job. And reality is, you can be amazing at the job, but if you're terrible at the business of that, then you're stuffed.
100%. And I kind of feel that in my closer network now, no one in my personal network works in the same industry, but I've got a few different business owners that are really close to me. And now that advancement into the operation side of things, I look at things and I ask questions and I'm like, well, your process is screaming at me that it could do with some advancements or more efficient, but I don't work in your industry and I don't need to work in that industry to see that. And I think that's kind of what people need to be open to, is that concept.
I think, yeah, people say, don't they, when you get to a certain level of any business, it's very similar. You've got a sales department, you've got a complaints department, you've got an HR department, you've got a marketing department. What's the leads coming in? What's the conversion rate off the back of it? What's our fall through rate? How much money we get at the end of it? Whether you're selling byros or houses, it's the same sort of process throughout.
Yeah, and that's what the estate agents need who are transitioning into the self-employed market. They need to know what to do when, what happens, and ultimately how they run their business 24 hours a day without the need of people from the brokerage. We're always there, our support is always there, but they need to be able to self-serve their own businesses. And I think that's what sometimes people don't necessarily realize when they're considering joining a self-employed brokerage, is what happens if everyone's on holiday? And that's always kind of my leading light here at the Avenue, is if I'm on holiday 3 weeks and I turned my phone off and I was on a desert island, would they still be able to do what they do? And as long as that happens, I'm comfortable of where and how I'm contributing.
And I suppose it's sort of making yourself a smaller and smaller cog in the business. Now, one of my mentors in business always said, your goal is to make yourself the tea boy, Chris, and other tea positions are available. But it's make yourself a smaller and smaller cog of the business. So eventually you're like, I don't even know what I should be doing every day. Everyone's kind of just doing the doing sort of thing. I'm just kind of, overseeing sort of thing. That's always kind of my goal. I guess it's the same sort of direction with the clients you work with.
Yeah, and I think that frightened me at one point. of that transition to operations manager because I've always been really good at doing things very quickly for my seniors, and then that's kind of put me in the positions that I've got into is just knowing, take the initiative and just do. So then when you start taking away from that and thinking I've got to stop firefighting, I always call it, and actually build around that, that can be quite a scary prospect. And not all business owners want to remove themselves like that. And that's something that I think everyone needs to get over for the end goal to become the vision of that work-life balance, of it not necessarily being you the linchpin and everything stops when you're not here. Everyone deserves that freedom and time to switch off, no matter if they're the business owner or not.
So you've been quite open, public's probably the wrong word, but quite open the fact that when you first started working with James and Jack at the Avenue, like systems and processes were like a non-existent thing. Where did you begin?
I just kind of started from the front end as how agents come in. I always I looked at the onboarding first and kind of how that's happened because I felt that I had loads of questions that then I was picking up the phone going, okay, how do I do this? What do I do with that? And then I've got into a good habit now of whenever someone asks me a question, the immediate question I ask myself is, have we got a process for that? If not, why not? What's the nuance in that? And I go and build and straight away. So the next time someone asks the question, it's already there to be served. And I think it was easy to get overwhelmed and kind of just think, well, things just happen. They know what happens. But now I'm really good at sitting in that helicopter seat and thinking, if someone was on a desert island that had never been in this business and never been on this planet before, would they be able to do this? Yeah, probably. So that's kind of my metric to success.
You're a lot politer than me. I always think to myself, if I was a complete idiot, could I make this work? If we go for the lowest common denominator and work my way upwards, could I make? And the answer is, yeah, I think you're probably good. That it's probably detailed enough. And I think it's about, as you correctly say, if someone's asking you that question, there's probably 10 people behind the scenes who also want to know the answer to that question, but haven't got the guts to ask you the question directly. So by sort of answering that question for that one person, then going, actually, guys, I've built this video or process or guide or whatever, and this is your go-to from now on. Yes, it might take you, an hour's work, half-hour work, but if you save yourself 20 questions a week for the next 5 years, I mean, how much does that add up?
Yeah, 100%. And that transition has been major for my role within the brokerage. That's meant that I've got a lot more time out to actually, play with new ideas and look at different possibilities rather than just serving what's in front of me. Because that trait of customer service that I've got, I'll always just serve what's in front of me. I have that need. And that's been quite interesting, and I think that's advanced my leadership skills a lot recently. So I think it's nice to kind of look back at that transition. But we were quite open to the fact that when people joined us at that stage, we didn't have those things. And I look back at those partners who collaborated with us at that time, and I have a lot of gratitude to their trust and grace. And now I like to think that we're a really good option in the market, and there's place for people to thrive with us.
I think that's a really nice thing to do in any business. So I was looking for I was actually looking for my social media post when I first launched your first £100,000 estate agency, which must have been, I don't know, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And I was scrolling back to my Instagram like some considerable ways. So we post twice a day. So there's quite a lot of stuff on there. And I was going back and I was like, God, this stuff was terrible. Like, I never knew looking back it was so bad. But I think you can only really appreciate sometimes how far you've come by kind of looking back behind you.
100%. And I've learnt so much from that, and so have our agents, and seeing them grow and them grow their businesses and reach new heights, and also us as a leadership team advance. That's what really fills my cup, so to speak, is seeing the journey that we've gone on and kind of where we want to go in the next 5 to 10 years. Because I think it's easy to look at what you want to do in the future and then get overwhelmed and feel like you're not doing enough. But looking back, it's like what we've gone through and what we've been through and how we've transformed. It's it kind of touches me in a different way because, I'm not the business owner, but the business is always the last thing I think about at night, and I'm invested, and we have that culture that's so strong behind that.
Yeah, my partner always thinks I'm crazy because occasionally we're driving along, you kind of go to your partner, you're like, oh, what are you thinking about? And I'm always like, work. And she's like, God, you're so boring. I'm like, yeah, but I'm just thinking about this and thinking about that. Like, it's nice stuff to think about. It's not like I'm thinking about boring stuff. It's positive stuff at work. But yeah, it does most definitely sit on your mind. So So talk me through. So you mentioned your onboarding process. So I actually watched one of your onboarding videos on your website before today's podcast, and it looked very good. So one thing you were very open with and transparent with that in that video content was sort of talking about the valley of despair. So for
Yes.
agents who don't know about the valley of despair, which is not a series on Netflix, believe it or not, talk us through what that actually is.
So essentially, when you first are looking at a transition like self-employed estate agency, at first, when you're looking at the logo and the new things that you're going to order and the new boards and this new Facebook and social media page, you get really excited. You're like, this is going to be the best thing ever. And you kind of imagine this lifestyle and people get really excited. And then you get into it and then you put in some hard yards and they don't necessarily reap the reward straight away. And you start to kind of go down in your optimism and it starts to turn into pessimism. But that valley of despair is when you kind of hit that rock bottom point. You're thinking, this is not going to work. I've not got much left in me now. And then that turn, there'll just be a flip of the coin and all of the results that you put in the prior 90 days, because that's how I kind of measure it, is on a 90-day cycle. That starts to then bring stuff in and bring in conversations and wins. And then you start to go back up the hill and you start to become a bit more optimistic. But that's informed optimism. Because at the start, when you don't know anything and it's just this excitement of this new business, that's you're not informed, but you're very optimistic. And we say to agents when you come in, you are going to hit that valley, but my job is to be there with you, go down the hill, but also tell you you're going to hit it and get you there as quickly as possible. Because if I can get you there as quickly as possible, I can get you out. And I think that people need to be really realistic when they transition into self-employed estate agency. And that's something that I've always held quite close to me, is that, people are risking their life savings, remortgaging properties or taking loans out. This is not something to be done lightly. So we have to be very honest with how hard it is. So the valley of despair is just when you think it's not going to work, but you've got to get there and you've got to face it.
I'm going to ask you a little bit of a controversial question here, if that's okay. Do you think other people in the self-employed space who have a slight vested interest in agents joining them, should we say, do you think they somewhat flower it up? And you obviously you see the post on LinkedIn, it's like, oh, I went self-employed 2 months ago, and I earn more now than I earned in 2 weeks, and I earn da da da. And I'm having a coffee with my kids on a Wednesday, sort of thing. Do you think people kind of flower over the fact that at some point you'll be going, FFS, what the hell am I doing? Like, should I go back to working at Connell's again? It wasn't that bad. Those guys weren't that bad to work with. You think people kind of gloss over that for the kind of their own message or kind of direction they want to go in?
100%. And I wouldn't necessarily, I'd be as bold to say I don't necessarily think it's for their own message. I think it's for their own selfishness, because it's very easy to sit here and talk about the pros. And I'm someone that sees the pros. I see the financial kickback that agents can earn, but I won't sell that dream to everyone and anybody. I think that's quite irresponsible, because there's only so much life savings people have. There's only so much runway that potentially their partner who works in a different industry is going to hold up for them. And I think that, we talk about the financial stress, but think about the stress that it puts on relationships and families of that transition when, at the start, you're doing loads of things, but it doesn't necessarily look outwardly like you're doing much because you're not seeing the same level of appointments. So I think it's easy for people's other half to go, well, why are we risking this? What's going to happen? Properties fall through all the time. Transaction times are taking painfully long at the moment. And I think there is a level of responsibility to that message. And it's easy to go online and, spaces like LinkedIn and talk about what's gone well and how much you've banked. Everybody does it. But I just kind of sit back as more of a spectator, I think, and wish that people are a bit more open about how hard it is. Because I'm quite open with what's not worked and the lows that I've hit in my career and what I've kind of found hard to be. And self-employed estate agency for me was very hard on a personal level, but also very rewarding. So I think you can't paint that all the skies are blue, because it's down to the person, but what heavily dictates that person's success is their mindset. And I think you've got to prep them for that and really understand their mindset to carry them through that journey.
I mean, you kind of hard saying that I've never really thought about it too much before, but I guess probably the one of the hardest jobs in probably self-employed estate agency is probably the partner of a self-employed estate agent, because you kind of think about it, if you go into self-employed estate, it's kind of your choice to do it and you kind of know what you're getting into. But your partner, after a first week or two, they're like, so are you going to list any houses, or are you going to like sell any houses? Just into going out and recording videos and dropping leaflets and knocking on doors. Like when are we going to see some money off the back of this sort of thing? They have to have kind of like absolute blind faith and trust in you that you know what you're doing, you're going to make it work.
100%, and the pressure it puts on to the partner and families and, you're cutting out a wage for X amount of months. That is such a big commitment, and no one kinda thinks about that, and I always think a business owner who's preached about work-life balance and what they have at home is, I always think you are really well supported in your business venture, and I love to see that. But I think we need to be speaking about that a little bit more. I think we need to be speaking about what goes wrong and, the failures in the industry and what could really do with a shake-up and how we could support agents going through that. Because, like I said earlier, I'm big on that your will get you anywhere that you want, but realistically, we should probably put a barrier into a state agency now of some basic qualifications, just to really understand what our clients have on the line. And I think that's really got to change in the next 5 to 10 years of a state agency.
Yeah, it's kind of an easy come, easy go sort of thing, isn't it? Because if there's no barrier of entry to a state agency, and that's self-employed or just normal estate agency, then anyone could do it, which is great because obviously it is a nice open pool. But then you got to think that if the attrition rate is so high, actually, should some of those people have done it in the first place? Whereas if you have, I don't know, it's necessarily a qualification, but some sort of hoops to jump through sort of thing, you have to kind of go, right, actually, yes, I am serious. And yes, less people may go into that world, but actually a far higher percentage will actually survive it.
Yeah, and I read a statistic once about how we're one of the least trusted industries. That needs to change. That we've got people's biggest asset on the line here, and I think that when I was an estate agent, very first sitting in living rooms and meeting clients and doing viewings, I was really fortunate with the level of mentorship I had above to teach me what I needed to know. Because I spoke to similar people my age who've kind of followed the same paths in branches or whatnot, and it's just been when you faced it, you've learnt it. But that's the client's deal, that's the client's equity, that's the client's one opportunity to move to the new school. You can't just take a chance like that. That's a bit wild to me.
Yeah, I think a state agency throughout the land loves on-the-job training, I think is the official terminology for it, which I take you on a viewing, the next viewing is yours. That's the thing. You come on one valuation, the next valuation is yours. There you go.
Yeah, 100%. And, I was really fortunate that James ran the territory of Birmingham that I operated in, but his better half, Hayley, was on there to support me in my training through and through every day. Every day we'd speak, what's been going on. I went through such a rigorous training program before I was even let near a client that I was like, by the time I was like, are you real? This is big. Like I felt like I've hit a milestone. And it's things like that that I will always be grateful for.
So on other podcasts, you've talked about creating the best possible environment for your partner agents so they can make sure they can win and do as best they can do. What does that environment look like in practice? Culture, process, support. What are the ingredients you need to throw in there to make sure people are not only happy in their work, but also succeeding in their work as well?
Honestly, I could sit and talk to you all day about that, but I will try and keep it concise, because I'm learning that skill recently. But to remove as many barriers, to make things as clear as possible, and to make them feel comfortable to raise questions, ideas, and contribute. That's all that I wanna do. I put a new process out in the brokerage, and I'm like, "I want you to tear it apart. I want you to ask me as many questions as possible, and I'll go around different types of partners and kind of spin it round with them on the phone and just see what they say and what their contribution is, because I want them to help me make it better. I don't have any ego associated to the things that I build. I just want to be able them to know they can pick up the phone and say, "Have you ever thought about doing it like this?" Or, "I've seen something recently and I think we should do this." Or, "I just need some help," and just be comfortable with picking up the phone and asking for some help. As long as the agents in our brokerage know that, that's a win all day for me.
Yeah, and I guess that's a big high five to the culture of any business. You can just phone someone and say, "Look, I was just phoning because this is going crap, and actually, can we talk about it for 5 minutes?" Because I think if you have a large corporate structure, you're not going to phone your managing director and say this is not going very well because they're like, "Well, you're crap at your job." Whereas if you're self-employed or you're working with a brokerage, actually to have someone you can talk to, whether they're your peers or someone in the office, whatever it may be, to say, actually, this is what I'm doing and it's not working very well. What do you think? I think that takes a lot.
Yeah, and it's them also knowing that we have their best interests at heart. We lead every decision through the brokerage that it's got to be a win for the partners, a win for the clients, and a win for the avenue. And ultimately, I treat the partners as our clients. I don't get involved with transacting clients. Obviously, that's the partner's remit. So they're my clients. So I need to make sure that we're still the best option for them to have that business with and partnership with. And I think sometimes there's the way that self-employed estate agency has grown and the market share it now has is a fantastic transition to see. But we've just got to be careful that we protect that and make sure it's still the good environment to be in.
So if I looked at a cross section of the Avenue partner agents and I took the best of the bunch, so your top 5-10%, for example, what's in the DNA of those people that makes them in that top 10%? What's the sort of traits they're doing? What's the process they're doing? What's the mindset they're doing? What are the main focus that make them a cut above the rest?
Open mindset to what is right today might not be right tomorrow. So sometimes we have to pivot in these different markets and these different challenges. But for me, it always comes down to the driver. The driver is bigger than money. It's bigger than the financial compensation that they get for their input. It's what they want to build and what they want to give themselves and their family. And I think that anyone can make it as long as they have a strong understanding of their driver.
And
And if I know that, I can work with that.
I guess that's that's all that most people really want in the world is a can-do attitude, whether it's an employee coming on board, whether it's a partner agent coming on board, whether it's a colleague, you just want someone who goes, let's give it a go. I may not be the best in the world of it, I may not be the worst in the world of it, but I'm going to throw my weight behind it and hopefully it goes okay sort of thing. So you kind of just want that sort of, all right, let's give it a go.
Yeah, both feet in. And if there's anything that you question, tell me you're questioning it because I'm a person that I'll question everything. I've always seen that I question myself and it comes from like an issue of confidence. But just know how to tell me what's kind of going through and we can talk about it because I will never just shoot someone down if I know. I'll just ask a few questions and then we'll likely land on what's the best outcome. But they just need to be honest with themselves. And I don't necessarily think it comes down to being honest with me. I think it's honest with themselves. And I think that mindset is what really needs to be the focus.
So if we were looking from glass half full to be glass half empty, what are some of the mistakes you see from not necessarily the Avenue agents, but agents across the board that will kind of be a very short route to being re-employed again and sort of self-employed agency not being the right track for them?
Doing things for a few times or once and expecting a result. I definitely felt that. But you have to be really committed. And even when you get faced with rejection or a no or a setback, you've got to just get up and go again. And I'm really fortunate to have people who have kind of taught me that lesson. But the longer you leave it, the worse it gets. You've got to get over yourself. You've got to just get into the mix of what you actually want and make it happen. You can't sit back and wait for the results, unfortunately, because if it was that easy, there would be no employee roles in the estate agency.
So
No.
let's talk about personal branding in estate things. You did a podcast a while ago with I forget what their name is. They're like a LinkedIn branding, personal branding specialist person. Great explanation of them. And you were talking through sort of the difference between sort of business content and the connection content side of things. Because lots of agents out there sort of just post pictures of houses and what they've sold and what they're kind of renting out recently. How can people sort of share their personal stories without oversharing and make their content feel sort of real and authentic, but rather than sort of being a corporate estate agency sort of line?
And yeah, I remember the podcast. It was with Rochelle. I think that what you need to be comfortable with is knowing from the get go what you're prepared to share. And if it feels like something that you would actually say in an informal environment, in a coffee shop, down the pub, at the like playing paddle, I don't know, then that's the way to go with it. It's when you're forcing a narrative. Like as an estate agent, even though the age demographic that I'm in my mid to late 20s now, I couldn't really connect with people of a similar age, the young couple just about to have kids. I always struggled with that customer avatar, but I thrived with people who are downsizing over 60. And felt like I had to talk about family homes and moving with children. No, I didn't. I just needed to speak to the clients that I wanted to attract because I understood what they needed. I understood how to show up for them. And that narrative of me understanding what it's like doing viewings with children at home is not a narrative that I understand. So that's a falsified person that I'm putting out there. So just be honest with who you want to attract and who you want to work with, because you don't need to be an option that fits all. People have to have opinions on you. So you have to be comfortable with that, because if nobody has an opinion, you're not memorable.
This is the most middle class thing I've ever said in my life, but I've just written an article for Property Industry Eye on that exact topic, and literally about how specialization is like the root of 2026. And if you're a generalist estate agent who's like, I do anywhere from one bedroom flats to £1 million houses, then that is not the way to go. Actually, now 2026, the big focus is going to be, I'm the expert in downsizers or the bungalows or in upsizers or in flats or investments or out of town properties, and sort of really directing. I guess it's kind of like almost like finding your tribe effectively.
100%. And, if I ever went back into sitting in living rooms and helping clients move, I'd only go one way with that, and I'd be certain on what way I'd go. And it'd be only working with that sort of client. The downsizers, I know exactly what to do. And it's okay at first if you don't know which one you are best at. That's okay. But it's just understanding that you need to work towards that and become known in that space, because there's a lot of good competition out there. There's access to, podcasts like yours or your offering in the market that really helps estate agents get that leg up. But they have to really know what they're looking for at the same time. You can't have it all, because then it's just a recipe for burnout, and that's an entirely different topic. But we call it niche famous. And sometimes agents who come from that corporate or, that heavy serving environment are like, no, I can't turn things down. I need to go for 50 million areas, and I need to do all of this, and I need to do all of that. That's not sustainable, and you will reach a level of the valley of despair that might be a bit too hard to get you out of. So the niche famous bit is key.
And on the same podcast, you talked about the difference between lurkers and likers, which I really like that sentence. I'm going to use that in my vocabulary from now on, and how the silent audience can sometimes be the most profitable. Kind of talk me through that concept.
I mean, you never know who's watching, because when people say to me, "Oh, that post," I might say to an agent or someone, "Oh, I really like that post that you did. Oh, it only got like 10 likes." My first question back is, everything you see on social media that you like or find comical or you pay attention to, do you like or comment on it? No. Well, there you go. Because you like things, but you don't necessarily engage with them. That's the same for your audience. And we did it with one of the partners' businesses. They were saying, look, I'm doing a bit of a series on socials at the moment, but the engagement's really low. I think I'm going to pack it in. I said, okay. I mean, you've looked at the analytics, but maybe just ask your clients some questions. One of their clients said, "Oh, in evaluation, most important, appointment of all," said, "Oh, we've been watching that series that you've been doing. I love that." But they didn't engage with it. And those are the clients that are actually traveling down the funnel and transacting with you. If you get loads of surface level engagement, I don't necessarily think that straight away means loads of business.
Mm.
And that's quite hard for people to get around of, because it's a sense of validation. You want to know that putting yourself out there on social media, doing things that you've never done before, is liked, but you've just got to be rest assured, and the messaging is key, and people out there are watching you. You don't even know it. You've got to keep showing up.
Oh, I was having a chat with a client the other day who is fairly shy in the grand scheme of things. And I said, "Oh, yeah, how's your social media going?" She's like, "Oh, I've done a couple of videos sort of thing." I was like, "Great. Well, how's it gone?" She's like, "Oh, one of them only got 250 views." And I was like, "Right. Okay." I was like, question for you. If I said to you, I'm going to open up this video call to 250 people and you have to do a webinar to those people about that property for 250 people on a webinar, do you think you'd be a bit nervous about it? She's like, yeah, I wouldn't do that in a million years. Like, well, that's literally what you're doing with 250 people. So don't lose sight of the figures and go, oh, it's only 250 people. Because if I had to stand on stage in front of 250 people, I would know about it. If I stood in front of a stage of 100 people, I would know about it. So I think people lose sight of sort of the numbers because they're so used to like, oh, a million views or a billion downloads and 1,000 shares, whatever. Whereas actually to get 400 people, 200 people, 100 people to watch your content for 60 seconds or 30 seconds, that is a big deal.
100%, because it's exactly that, isn't it? Like, I was at an event and on stage recently for EAX and 10 with Life Cycle and Iceberg Digital. And I knew a lot of faces in the room, but when I got up there and looked out into the audience, I thought, right, this is interesting. Just, keep going. Um, But I was like, and it made me think of my LinkedIn impressions because I'm quite open with the fact that I'm not a huge fan of LinkedIn. I like aspects of it, but I also think that the messaging is quite, you're only going to go for the good, what we were talking about earlier. But I was thinking about my impression and I was like, okay, this audience has definitely taught me a few things, exactly what you just said. Because it's interesting, isn't it? We live in a world where that's a sign of validation and we see things that break the internet and the most liked post and the most amount of engagement and what SEO recommends you to do. And you just kind of think, well, actually, I just want people in my local area who've got houses to sell who are downsizing to know who I am. That's realistically in a postcode, only a few hundred people.
Oh, the number of times I've had posts absolutely bomb or videos absolutely bomb, and then someone said to me, "I watched that video. That was really good." And I think to myself, "No one watched that video. You might be the only one, but they did, and they remembered it, and they had contact with me about it." So I completely agree with that, 100%. Right. So last section, we're gonna ask you some quick fire questions, if that's okay, which I've not kind of warned you on at all. So I'm not gonna throw under the bus too much, Holly, don't worry. So one recommended resource. So this can be a book, a podcast, something that every agent should listen to, read, engage with, just to make themselves better.
Buy back your time, Dan Martell.
Oh, good book. Good book. I like that one. Let's do this podcast now again as well. Very AI focused these days, but good podcast. What's the biggest misconception about the Avenue or self-employed estate agency in general?
Oh, good question. That it's meant for one particular type of person. We've got a lot of different agents who have got a lot of different backgrounds and, attitudes towards a state agency. But the reason why it works is that the vision and the core values are the same. So I think it's great to, pick up the phone to one of our agents and just ask them their interpretation. I'd rather someone who's interested in joining the brokerage do that than ring me at first port of call. And I'd quite like that to be the way for every opportunity that we have.
I love that. And last one, it's a little bit more personal. What's your favorite way to switch off? Once you finish building your processes and systems and making sure James and Jack aren't doing anything too terrible, what is the way that you switch off and just chill out at the end of work?
I just love sitting down at the end of the day and talking to my grandmother. She lives with me. She's got early dementia, and my partner about what they've done, telling them loads of things that they probably don't necessarily understand day to day, and just kind of having that debrief in our own little way. I don't necessarily look for much in hobbies and external environments. I just know how good I've got it in my personal life, and I just like to enjoy that.
Oh, I love that. I love that a lot. Holly, thank you so much for coming on. You've been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Cribs.